Hello everyone, welcome to Struggle Session. I am your host, Leslie Lee III. Today we have a great episode for you. Joining me today will be Chris Person from Highlight Reel, an excellent YouTube series on gaming, and we'll be discussing, of course, the biggest game in the world right now, Baldur's Gate 3. We'll also be talking a little bit about Armored Core 6, as well as Starfield. You can get this show, as long as hundreds of other bonus episodes and commentaries ad-free at sesh.show, where you can subscribe to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/strugglesession, or our Substack, strugglesession.substack.com, or our Supercast, which is just the RSS feed at strugglesession.supercast.com. Thank you all so much for your support. You don't know, it's meant the world to me over these past couple of months. I'm still hanging in there with the long COVID. I hope all of you are out there staying as safe as you can. And if you get sick, make sure to stay home and rest for as long as possible. One more announcement before we get into the show. Jack's book, Kill the Rich, that he co-wrote with Kate Shapiro, who's been on the show before, it's out right now. You can get the book published by Clash Books, great publisher, from anywhere you buy books. Get it at your local bookstore. It's everywhere. With that being said, on with the show.
It's here. You hear what I'm telling you? In my mind, I created it. The culture, I created it, and it's real. Don't you understand?
So Chris, why is everyone in the world, all the gamers out there, why are they going crazy for Baldur's Gate 3?
Because they've not had something like this for a very long time. I don't know. It's kind of a power vacuum situation to me. First off, Larian did a great job. I'm like 160 hours into this game because I decided to play like tactical mode, which you don't have to do. I just want to say it's fun in the beginning. I don't know why I'm still doing it, but it really does make the game kind of a motherfucker. It's hard at that level, and it gets harder when you get to those second and third act like skill checks. You can see why people are like power gaming this and making like obscene builds. I think it's a combination of things. Yeah, it's a combination of like, man, it's been a while since we had like a Western RPG that was good. I mean, technically it's been a while since we've had like a JRPG, like capital JRPG that was like of that budget, that wasn't like an action game too in some way. Like even like Final Fantasy hasn't been like turn-based in like the capital, in like the way that people remember it since like, I don't know, like 10.2. I think people were like, hey, yeah, let's do this about it. You know, Dragon Age Inquisition was a while ago, and even that was like, people weren't 100% on, and I kind of agree, you know, parts of that were not great. But also it's a really unique case because like they had time to do this. You can look at Divinity 1 and 2 and be like, okay, there's like a very clear trajectory from here to Baldur's Gate. But like the scale of like, wow, you voice acted that rad. You didn't have to do that. You voice acted a lot of rats. There's so many rats you can talk to in this game, and they all have different like voices and stuff, or spiders. And, you know, not to quest spoiler too much, but there's like a part of the game, this is a little tiny side quest, I will say, where you can just like, if you can talk to animals, which I make sure you have somebody who can, you can just like convince a bunch of spiders to move to a different community that's more amenable to their like survival. They're like, look, ideologically and from a religious perspective, that community, the drow are so much better for you because they love spiders. You don't want to stay. And it's just like stuff like that is so nice, particularly when it feels like, you know, I think a lot of people have this gut feeling like you can't, it feels weird that this is allowed to be made.
Because you have so much freedom and you can do anything, which means failing a lot as well. You can, like, it's such a different game. And for people who have not played it, what kind of separates this game from a lot of similar RPGs, even your Dragon Ages and your Mass Effects, is that, you know, this is a Dungeons and Dragons game and failure is a big part of it. When you're playing like a Mass Effect, you're basically it's more of a less a choose your own adventure. It's more of a choose your own power fantasy. Like there's no real way for things to go too badly for you. When you're picking your dialogue options, you're not picking them based on whether or not you're going to fail this mission or not. You're basically, what cutscene do you want to see in this mission? You know, what kind of character you want to be. While in Baldur's Gate, the game is constantly like fucking with you and tricking you and making suggestions for things that you should do, which will completely like close off a quest and in the quest kill somebody that you don't want to die. You don't know what's going to happen based on any of your dialogue choices. You're just kind of navigating this world and the world reacts to you not based on like what your fantasy would be or your power fantasy would be, just what the writers think would be kind of interesting or funny. So it's such a different type of game and it can be a little bit frustrating. And that's why I was kind of interested, like why so many people got into this game when so much of the rest of gaming is about like delivering you, hand feeding you the story, the plot, the things you want, where this game just kind of throws you way, way, way on the deep end to the point where even if you're like trying to use like a strategy guide, like you're still like not going to, you dumb.
I'm not anti-save scam. I think people just need to mind their own damn business. You know what I mean? Like I'm too OCD to like with certain games, where like, no, I can't, I have to go back for that thing because that thing will make, and I'm actually glad I kind of did because there's some parts of Act 3 that are just so brutal. I'm like, yeah, if I didn't get that, like, if I didn't get that thing, that would be really biting me in the ass right now. There is so much complexity, I think. And like the game is, especially in Act 3, like kind of tearing apart at the seams at the possibilities. It is a miracle that they made this, like so many systems work with each other. Actually, if you have a chance, Jason Schreier in Bloomberg has a really good, formerly of Kotaku, has a really good, piece about just sort of the development of it and like how unique it is. And like there was not to speak too ill of, Destin and IGN, but there was like a video on IGN about like, you know, game creators are frustrated that like yada yada yada, that like at the success of it, and it's like the conversations around game development in this game have been really frustrating because it is this really unique situation and that they have going in the same way that like, not to get too ahead of it, but like From and Armored Core, like that's a very long trajectory that let them make Armored Core 6. You know what I mean? Like Larian put the time in to do this. They got people's trust they got the trust of the real heads to do this game.
I mean, we should mention this game has technically been out. You could play it since 2020.
Like 2 years. Yeah, like the pandemic started and you could play this game in some weird form. In beta, obviously, it was early access. And like, that's a huge part of like, you know, tuning things so that, and it's weird to see a game. I think this is the largest game of this scale that's let that happen. I mean, like Hades is another example, but Hades is like, you know, nowhere near as complicated as this. And then even within that, like the scale of what they're doing is so huge that like, it does tear apart. And like, particularly when you get to the city, you know, and stuff like that. But like, you know, it's enervating, but like, it shouldn't be that like, you know, like, oh, they made this now. Cause this is the thing, like a lot of gamers become just like anti-dev and anti-press, you know what I mean? For sometimes good reasons and sometimes very bad reasons, you know what I mean? But for the most part, it's not like there's no dev out there that doesn't want to make this game or doesn't want the chance to make this game. You know what I mean? It's just a bunch of guys being like, tenting their finger, like the dumbest motherfuckers on earth, tenting their fingers and being like, okay, so how can we make it a Soulsborne? You know what I mean? Like, if you look, and like, this is what makes the BioWare thing so frustrating to happen. Like,
oh, well, let's explain it before we get into it. So what? Enunciate. What was the? What's kind of the poo-pooing that people are doing about the development specifically? If you could enunciate it.
You shouldn't take this game as a, like, you know, it's the whole lazy devs thing. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you know, devs are lazy. They don't want to do this. They would rather just, you know, eat hot chip, blah, blah, blah. You know, all that dumb crap. And it's like, no, development's really hard. There's no such thing as a lazy dev. There are people who are trapped in jobs they don't like, talking to stupid, like, people they don't want to talk to. You know what I mean? Like, that is the situation basically for every job in America. It's like there's a bunch of people who are overpaid at the top who get them to do things. And also just the reality of game development being hard. You know what I mean? Like, it's so rare for these things to line up. We should aspire to a situation where somebody has a couple of years to just let it go. And like, where their funding structure is so unique. I mean, like, I think they had to like expand their studio size like 6x to do this, basically. Like, they scaled up. It was a really weird situation, but it worked. It paid off. It was a huge gambit and it worked. I don't know. I get frustrated because, like, I feel like in these discussions of people who make games and people who report on games, they never talk about the people who tell the people who make games how to, you know, what they have to do. You know, it's very, very rarely just, the conditions are never rarely articulated. You know what I mean? The same way that everything that's owned by like a private equity firm or like guys who've been on the Epstein, you know, plane. You know what I mean? You should be like if Bobby Kotick and all these guys are not instructive, and you know, that's not to get ahead, but that's part of, like, I mean, Bioware's complicated, very, very, very complicated, and you know, but like they don't, you know, it's like they got rid of people who wrote Minsk. They got rid of the Minsk guy. They fired the guy who wrote Minsk. You know what I mean? Who's like you know, for people who know, Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, you know, he's the guy you think of when you think of Baldur's Gate, you know.
At the same time, while Baldur's Gate 3 is the #1 game in the country, and as you've been alluding to, this is something that gamers have been wanting and asking for, a nice deep dive single player Western style RPG, which, by the way, you can also do co-op as well. You know, we've had these,
which is wild.
Yes,
you can do that. You could. Okay, sorry, not to go back into it. I do want to get back into the game itself a little bit after this tangent. But like, yeah, you can just like sneak while a cutscene's going on. Your friend can like sneak up behind you and just do hijinks and crap. And that's like, I was like, how did you pull that off? That's you know what I mean? Anyway,
this money was sitting on the table, is what I'm saying. Like EA could have made a Dragon Age up to similar to this, up to this standard, if they had people in charge who kind of knew what they were doing at all. And so while this game is having this great success, EA has laid off many of the original creators of the Baldur's Gate series over at Bioware. 50 developers laid off, including people that they said, a lot of people said, a lot of writers that they thought would just never, you know, get fired, never get laid off, because of course they were like the people who started, you know, Baldur's Gate, KOTOR, that's made all this money. The reason why EA bought Bioware in the first place.
The guy who wrote Joker, you know what I mean? The guy who created Joker as a character from Mass Effect, you know what I mean? Like, these are the people who like are, you know, like, and to be clear, Dreadwolf, I've heard from people who know that, like, who people I trust, that they are pleased with the development of the next Dragon Age game.
Yeah, to mention, these layoffs are happening during the development of the new Dragon Age, as well as a new Mass Effect game. So it's not like they didn't need these people. And I think the staff of BioWare is 250 people. So laying off, 50 people, that's laying off, you know, a fifth of the workforce.
Yeah, it's also just like, man, just thinking about Anthem again. Anthem was so rough. And what's funny is I did play a bit of Anthem. I think a lot of people didn't. I don't know. Movement in that game was kind of fun, but it just did not hold together. I mean, you don't need to talk at all about the failings of Anthem, but it's like, that feels just very like the hand of EA, like, you need to create something that's persistent. We need a Destiny out of you guys. And it's like, why did you go to them for that? Or why did whoever was in charge of that think that was a good idea? You know what I mean? Like, do what you know, man. Like,
Yeah, it was such a misstep too, because first of all, there was already a Destiny, as well as, like, I think, what was the paramilitary one, that the paramilitary looter shooter that was out. I forget, the Division as well. Like, there was only so much space. Our idea, and we said this on a prior struggle session, is they should have just taken the multiplayer from Mass Effect 2 and 3 and made a standalone free-to-play game and let people spend money on, like, skins of, like, the different aliens, a sexy Krogan skin. They would have made gangbusters money with a game they basically had already made, and would have saved themselves, a few million, dozen $1 million.
It's funny because, like, it feels like I can't get over traversal, because it did have, like, this element of, like, oh, you guys really liked Iron Man.
Yes.
Or, like,
exactly.
moving around like Iron Man. And, like, you almost got that part right, but the rest of the world just didn't work and didn't feel right. And, it's really, oh God, it's so fascinating. Like, yeah, but just to get back to the game, because I don't want to talk too much about, like, the it's also one of those things where, like, there's might be a bunch of stuff I'm not privy to, in terms of the internal development of that, and also just, like, the weird ways these big developers have been sort of like collapsing in on themselves, or just, like, Ubisoft's not in a particularly good place right now, it seems. You know what I mean?
Which is strange, because now, like, every new game that I'm seeing, every new IP looks like Assassin's Creed, strangely enough. Like, for some reason, they're just biting hard on Assassin's Creed, like, years after it's gotten popular, which is so strange to me.
Well, they keep making these, like, big, empty, like, open world games that are, like, medium-sized open world games that don't have really anything dynamic about them, like a GTA or something like that. You know what I mean? Because those are hard to make, or even Breath of the Wild, or Tears of the Kingdom. These things that like actually have, like, a lot of, like, places that they can go wrong. You know what I mean? It's always very like we need a medium to large size, in the case of Odyssey, which was way too big, exploration game with, like, places you can get bases, and then, like, a sort of French Canadian style narrative, like that's. But no, I mean, like, to talk a little bit more about Baldur's Gate, because I do want to, and I do want to talk a little bit about Armored Core if you'll permit.
Oh,
me.
absolutely.
Because it fucking rules. It's so good, dude. Armored Core 6 is so good. I think there's a lot of things that make Baldur's Gate work, like the ability to. I think it's sort of like, how in Dungeons and Dragons, like, you can kind of bullshit your way, if your DM is, like, charitable, into using, like, really underpowered skills in really overpowered ways.
Yeah, it's
good. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, oh,
they want to have
conjure
fun.
minor illusion. Yeah, you're like, I'm gonna use minor illusion for something a little outside of its intended use case. But if your DM is like, that's a really creative use, I'll allow it. That's kind of the feeling of the game, which makes it unique. Like, it has a pretty good physics engine. Shove is the most powerful ability in the game.
Oh my God. I do want to mention that I haven't played a ton of Baldur's Gate yet, but I did go back and play Divinity, which is prior to this, and there is no shove, and I missed it so much. Like, shove is so much fun. Like, if you're ever struggling with a fight, just shove a motherfucker off something or into something that's burning.
If you can, I wish you could throw people a little bit more, but you're mainly throwing goblins, you know what I mean? Even if your strength is at 20. But yeah, like, shove is really good. Warlocks get an ability called Eldritch Blast, you know what I mean? And then if you specialize within that, it can have a push mechanic, basically. So I'm maining Will, which is a mistake. Don't main one of the companions, just make your own guy. But Will is a warlock, and he can just knock shit off. Minor illusion as a cantrip is basically the Hitman coin. Like, it distracts an enemy. It will generate a cat, is what it does. It generates a cat that is a minor illusion cat, and you use it to kite enemies away and then onto a bridge where you shove them off with Eldritch Blast. And then, shoving the balance of shove is that you don't get the loot of whatever that thing is dropping because it's now in a bottomless pit. Which is a pretty actually good thing, but it's fun to see what you can shove off of a cliff. Or there was another thing where you can get an owlbear to kind of slam down from the top rope.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah,
because
it's calculated by weight and by height, actually. So it's basically like featherfall if the momentum hit the ground. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's so many fun ways to expect, because this game is fucking hard, by the way. It's
really brutal.
The combat is like, you will be surprised by how much you will get absolutely destroyed very early on in this game. But before you even learned all the mechanics, you really have to be careful about your positioning, how you move, where you place people. But then you learn that you can kind of cheat. Like if you're about to, go in on somebody, you can be, your main guy can be talking to the person while your other characters can sneak around for some good elevated shots or something like that. You can use the environment to explode things. I mean, there's just oil everywhere on the ground.
Grease is the most powerful spell / item you can get outside of shove because and this is actually something that Dungeons and Dragons heads know for a while, which is that grease is fucking overpowered because it lights on fire. So a minor cantrip can just make the whole area explosive. But basically every time something walks on it, it has to pass a check or slip on its ass. And that never stops being funny. And this is what makes it feel slightly different than just a CRPG came along and then everybody was well, finally one of these. Cause you couldn't do that crap in Dragon Age or, in Mass Effect or even Kotor and stuff. You know what I mean? It has these dynamic elements that are very pure Larian shit. You know what I mean? That are that feel good to the Dungeons and Dragons spirits. I also have one other question. Did you see that Dungeons and Dragons movie that came out?
Yes, I did actually.
I thought it was pretty okay.
Yeah,
it was fine.
It's good. I thought
it was pretty good.
I thought it was a pretty good movie. Yeah. I had one specific critique. I don't remember what it was, but I think maybe it was just
it's not perfect. It's goofy Dungeons and Dragons movie. I was it was like being brainwashed into, it was like if somebody wiped my memory and then showed me Firefly.
Ah, yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Where it's just I don't have the context. It's banter works here.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a similar thing where it's you guys completely, as you're watching the movie, you can be I can see how you as a DM, that's the key to that movie working. Aside from the fact that the guys did, I think, Game Night, which is pretty good. The key to it working is you can see every point in which they
the skill
played
checks
out this. You can see all the skill checks and you can see them failing the skill checks. You can see them passing the skill checks and you can see the dynamics of it working, which is why it feels like a really solid, I'd say B+, A- Dungeons and Dragons movie. It's a little goofy. It's a little your friend on Facebook who is kind of the only person they know in town like that, who has 3 friends at the card store kind of movie, but it's fucking good. You know what I mean? It's solid. It bangs, man. It does there's a whole part where he gets basically, it's not Dimension Door. It's a level 6 spell that lets you create a portal between two spaces. But a level 1 guy gets a fucking staff to do that. And it works. And a similar dynamic is at play with Baldur's Gate, and Larian, is that they have this situation where you're oh, this feels like a good campaign. And it feels like a good campaign in a way that it feels like there is a creative DM kind of rolling with you. You know what I mean? And kind of oh, you fucked that up. Don't worry. We'll figure that out down the line. We'll account for you fucking everything up. And the accounting is really, really impressive.
So we were talking about traversal earlier and how people are copying the Assassin's Creed thing. There's tons of traversal in this game, but it's a different style completely that feels so much more. It's at the same time it's more cartoonish, but it feels more tactile as well because there's so much more stuff to interact with. The animations aren't super specific in Red Dead Redemption, but this world feels a lot more real because like there's more shit you can do. There's every nook and cranny to look into. Like it just has a very, I don't know, if even though like you mostly are looking at it from a skies high perspective, it feels so much more immersive than a lot of the games that like try to go for the hyper realistic mode.
Yeah, and there's a lot of platforming. Throwing is huge in the game. You know, like, yeah, it has like a real physicsy feel to it. Like, yeah, it feels really dynamic in a way that like RPGs don't. Like, you know, I have my complicated feelings about Final Fantasy 16. I think it's fine. You know what I mean? I think people got like mad in multiple ways about it. I unfortunately like action RPG. I don't know. I like character action games. Who cares? It's a longer conversation. But like the biggest, I think, and most cogent, I think, explanations about what people had against that game is that the world feels really closed off and the quests kind of suck. You know what I mean? I think those are the best, like, you know, they're MMO quests. They're like, you know, kill 5 goblins stuff. And, you know, no quest in Baldur's Gate feels like that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
No quest feels like that. If you talk to a mouse or you talk to a dead guy, they've thought about that. Like they've thought about like putting items in places that you would never even think of doing it. You know, there's so much, the density of lore here and the density of caring about this is so interesting. It's also going to be really interesting to play Starfield after this, because I'm not excited to play Starfield. I'm going to be honest, man. That game looks like like a lot of people who liked other games, or a lot of people who enjoyed Fallout 3 and 4 are going to like that game, and maybe I'll like it. I don't know. They seem really confident in it, but it's going to be interesting to see this like really procedural big story that does have like concrete elements to it against something that's very intentional. Because like, you know, the other thing I've been saying is that like Baldur's Gate 3 is a Hitman game. It's a majesty of like intentional design. Like you'll get to a goblin camp at one point and you'll see like, okay, do I fight this guy? How do I fight this guy? Wait a minute, I can go up in the rafters. And then you'll just be planning an assassination like a Hitman game. You're like, I'm going to knock those. I can hit the arrows onto, you know, like a chandelier that will drop on him. I'll put a bunch of grease on the ground. I'll throw this, you know, you're setting up like a Three Stooges situation to happen, you know, so that they, you know, like light on fire and shit. And it's that's the thing I like more. I want things that are crafted by people, that are crafted and take a lot of time and a lot of patience, and that I can play multiple times and multiple ways. And honestly, you know, I don't think I'm going to do it soon, but down the line, I kind of want to play this as like a monk or something, because I haven't played any monks in this game. You know what I mean? Or, you know, somebody that's like, maybe I'll get the Dark Urge path, which just seems to be like having harm OCD or something.
That's actually the one I went with, the Dark Urge path, because it seems like interesting. I know all these games more or less are about becoming a god or killing god. I feel like this is the most direct path to becoming a god or something of that sort. But I've had a lot of fun playing it. I actually chose Warrior to start off with. For some reason, every, you know, game I play, every RPG, I have to do at least one run of just like the fucking basic Space Marine, if it's massive, if it's a sci-fi thing, or just a guy with the big sword. I always want to be like a guts type guy, at least one time. Because frankly, magic, I feel, is like cheating anyway, more or less, but you know.
You can talk your way out of a lot of stuff in this. Like they really go out of their way to do that. What's really interesting, so like that's why I was like, well, I want to do my, you know, the charisma guy first round, but like the fact of the matter is you can like really get by on like a lot of different builds, and you can actually respec very easily. There's a character you'll meet in like one of these areas, and in a crypt, I'll just say it, in the first area.
But you can miss them. I do want to mention, we haven't mentioned this.
It's so funny.
You can miss like companions, like very easy. Like people who are supposed to be in your party. You can just skip over them.
They're pretty good at rubber banding it for a little bit. You know,
they do have that?
Here, I don't know if they do with him, with Withers, but it is very funny that he's kind of out of the way, and he's the guy. Like, this is why I'm like, you can maybe look a little guy, but like you'll definitely find that area either way. But definitely make a priority because he's also how you resurrect people if they die.
Yes.
And they will capital D die. I mean, like you can use scrolls, but like there's a character who just is your respec and revive guy, and absolutely go for that. Also, there's a thing that lets you talk to dead people in there, and talking to dead people is really, really fun. There's one specific quest, I won't say what, that lets you just do it as much as you want. I think there's also skills and other ways to do it without like recasting. And I immediately beelined for that thing. It's a pain in the ass quest that but it unlocks like a lot of things. But you also get a lot of scrolls of talk to dead people, and you can just like, there's a instance of like you can just take the amulet that you can get and pass it around to people. You know what I mean? And be like, all right, well that guy can do it once. You know, like it's really fun. But yeah, you can just miss people. Yeah. It's so cool. They really do account for it too.
All right, and so before I let you go, we do have to talk about the other big game that everybody's playing,
Starfield. No.
Armored Core. And I haven't played the latest one. I actually remember playing the first Armored Core because it was on like a PlayStation demo disc. And it was, I played that demo like maybe 100 times. And it was just, I had like, so just playing the demo. Kids these days, y'all don't know about how good those demo discs used to be. That was like a whole ass game for free most of the time. But
Arena tosh it in.
Oh, yes.
That you can actually get a lot of those. I think like archive.org has a lot of the CD, like the ISO files for those. I think one of them, the most infamous one is the one that has, a special, I think it's like PSX magazine, or I forget which one. I'm sorry. It's been fucking ages, but it has, the Mystery Science Theater 3000 crew in it doing a special thing for them. You know what I mean? I'm sure that's been uploaded a million times, but yeah, Armored Core 6, is very, very good. It's, FromSoft, the people who brought you, Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Kingsfield, Otogi, Ninja Blade, that one survival horror game from PS2 that looks pretty good.
Oh, Kuon. Oh, I actually have a disc copy of that. I don't have a PlayStation 2, but I have that game. I bought that game and I brought it with me to Japan because there's no way I'm going to find this motherfucker again.
FromSoft's like back catalog is like surprisingly deep, which is why I think people, it's one of the reasons why people are like kind of into this is like, look, we know what makes the money these days. It's Souls games. Souls games make the cash. That's up the front. But what makes Armored Core 6, Fires of Rubicon so interesting is that like the last Armored Core game was like in 2016 or 2013 rather. And that like wasn't the like Armored Core 5 was I'm just looking it up because I forget it too. And then there's like 4 Answer, which was 2008. Yeah, like it's been a while, dude. It's been a while. And so like there are Armored Core fans, but like the question is how many are there? You know what I mean? At this point, and like how, like everyone's like, are you going to make a Souls game or are you making an Armored Core game? And the answer is, thankfully, they're making an Armored Core game, which is really cool. You know what I mean? But that said, there's a lot of Sekiro in this game in the little margins in terms of like, oh, I can see that the guy who was like the lead on Sekiro made this game. This is the Sekiro group's, new thing. And like, I like the idea that like From is like, okay, we know what makes money. It's the Elden Rings. It's all those. We need our B team who's doing like the Bloodborns, the Sekiros, because those are the games that I actually really like more. Bloodborne is, I think, my favorite Soulsborne. You know what I mean? I think that's really, really good. It's part of the reason why I like Wo Long is because Team Ninja got the guy who worked at Sony, who was the co-developer of Bloodborne, to do the combat system, or co-directed, I believe. And that's why it feels really Bloodborne-y, even though it's like kind of a dumb Neo in Chinese. Did you play that game at all?
Yes, I actually played it a bit. I kind of fell off it. I just felt like been there, done that, as far as, I play a lot of Souls games, and with the long COVID, it's kind of lessened my tolerance for games. Like I need to play at the high level. I can't get the cut shit. I can't get the 60% stepped on shit. I need like the best of the best. So
So my thing is that like I think I have this weird I have weird feelings towards Team Ninja because I think that like Ninja Gaiden 1 and probably Ninja Gaiden 2 for Xbox is like one of the best games ever made. You know what I mean? In terms of character action games. And like, you know, it's funny to watch that, like, this is a very very side tangent. It's funny to watch that their post Itagaki output. And Neo is really good. Neo is very good. Neo 2 is very good. But those games are long, and they are games where they're games where the combat is the game is in service of the combat, not the other way around. I think a friend of mine put it. It's like those games are like the combat's the centerpiece, and then you're going into these weird arenas, and there's less of a holistic world being built around it. And so their combat's really, really tight. And then they got the guy from Bloodborne who also made Tokyo Jungle, or was the lead on Tokyo Jungle, to do it. And as a result, like the timing on the deflect is really neat because it's like you have to lean into it. You have to kind of its timing is very similar to Bloodborne's. And also the Lu Bu fight in it is fucking sick. It's probably one of the best boss fights ever. I have similar feelings about Stranger Paradise, which was the Final Fantasy game they made last year, which is a whole different discussion. But like, yeah, I like the Bloodborns and the Sekiros. I don't dislike Demon Souls and Elden Ring. I think they're phenomenal games, but they hold less for me because they're less action forward games, and I like an action forward game, and I feel like it's cool that they can have both of these two teams doing things that are have the same level of care and the same level of commitment, but just in different genres. And I like that they have like an exploratory commission team now, basically. I mean, I don't know the dynamics of it, but it's like that's what Sekiro felt like. Sekiro's like, all right, what if we made something a little more Ninja Gaiden-y? You know what I mean? And like, okay, now let's go back to our roots. What can we do outside of this thing that's just going to pay for our bills forever? You know what I mean? And like, Armored Core 6 is really neat. You can build mechs, you know what I mean? They like expect you to know a little bit, but not so much. You know, you can just kind of jump in, you know what I mean? What is nice is it is still mission based. It's not like a world you're exploring. So it's these little bits that you're taking off. But the second you hit a boss, you're like, oh, this feels, it's you're boosting, you know, you're doing mech crap, but it has the same kind of like relationship that you have with a boss of like, okay, here's his phase 1, here's his phase 2. He has a stagger meter because they did add a stagger meter. I do have potions in the form of repair kits, and like, how do I crack this? You know what I mean? And you do have, it's so cool that they got to do that. And it's the same way that it's so cool that Larian got to make, you know, Baldur's Gate 3. And it's like this really specific, like, man, just complete solar, you know, like lineup of all the planets, like, you know, getting in a very specific order so that they could do this. And in both cases, and I'm happy to see it. And then the other game we got to play Starfield.
Well,
it's on Game Pass.
We'll see about Starfield. But Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can people find you?
I'm Papa Pichu on Twitter, or you can just look up Chris Burson. And also I have a show called Highlight Reel on YouTube. Check it out. It's clips of cool things happening in the games, and sometimes bad glitches happening. And I feel like I'm going to get a lot from Starfield, despite people saying that it's like not buggy at all. I know that's false. I know some people who've said there are bugs. And it's also just such a complicated game. That thing is going to break, man.
I'm looking forward to
man.
I'm looking forward to the Xbox Series S games, which I will briefly mention. Baldur's Gate is going to be late to Xbox. I think it's coming in about a week on PlayStation 5.
It's playing on PS5. I think the hang up was local co-op, like split screen co-op.
Yes.
They couldn't get it to work on the lower end SKU Xbox, but they can get it to work on PS5 because PS5's, you know, PS5. And they can get it to work on the other one. But yeah, that was what was holding them up. So yeah, I think it's dropping on PlayStation the same day as Starfield, which is very funny. And then it's going to, I forget when, on Xbox later.
Yeah, they just said later, before the end of the year, sometime.
I think there is a date. I just forget it because, you know.
All right, folks. Thank you so much for joining us on Struggle Session. If you've been playing Baldur's Gate, Tell us about your build. Send us a voicemail at sesh.show. Peace.
Later.